Hello and welcome. I'm Cheche Lazaro. It's Election Day, May 9, and we come to you live from the Rappler News Center. This is Rappler's continuing coverage of the 2016 Philippine elections. With us today is Move.ph Director Zach Huzon and Pulse Asia President Ronald Holmes. Before we get to talk to them, we're waiting for a report from Patty Pacion, who is now in Ilocos, covering Bongbong Marcos, who is there to cast his vote. But before we do that, let's. Patty, are you there? We're rolling a clip of a report filed by Patty Pacion.
Ginawa ko lahat ng tinuturo natin sa mabuti. I made sure that na-shade na mabuti lahat ng aking napili na ihahalal. Tinignan ko na mabuti yung resibo. Maganda naman sa akin sa aking ginawa. Wala namang problema.
Sir, after ni po bumoto, proceeded po doon sa church pwede po bang malaman kung ano yung paano yung nagdasal, sir? Or ano yung...
Well, with the idea that Vox Populi, Vox Dei, I just ask that God's will be done. Because after all, that is what the election should be about.
Pero sir, sinabi niyo kasi before po na talagang confident kayo, pero recently kasi sir, meron di ba mga layaan or parang mali po sa sampling ng balota, and how do you feel about it?
Well, we're hopeful that we are still going to get a orderly and honest election. I was watching the procedure very closely. Mukha namang simple lang. Palagay ko naman naunawaan ng ating mga magiging naboboto ngayong araw na madali naman ang proseso. I hope that yung ano yung nangyari sa akin, yun din ang mangyayari sa lahat ng mga bumoto na simple lang, hindi nagka-problema. Yung aking binoto, yung aking sinade, yun ang lumabas doon sa resibo. At sana lahat ay ganyan ang magiging karanasan dito sa halalan ngayon.
Sir, na-expect ba natin magkaroon ng konting mga problema?
Lagi naman, siguro naman kahit kapano sa dami ng presinto, sa dami ng bumuboto, ang pinag-usapan dito ay milyong-milyong tao. Kaya kahit pa paano, may magkakamali, kahit magkakaproblema sa machine. Pero sana naman, handa na ang ating Comelec, handa na ang Smartmatic para pagka kahit na magkaroon ng kahit na anong problema, ay mabilis nilang ayusin at hindi maapektuhan ang kredibilidad ng halalan.
Sir, may mention kayo na may vote buying sa mga barangay chairman saka sa mga mayors?
Nako, kulang na lang magtayo ng buying station. Ang grabe ang bilihan ng boto, hindi lamang dito siguro hindi gaano, pero sa ibang lugar talagang balitang-balita at namomonitor namin ang mga report na unang-una kahit saan may bilihan ng boto at pangalawa, ang laking halaga ng pera ang binabagsak. Kaya ang payo namin sa ating mga kababayan ay basta kahit ano pang ang gawin ninyo, kung ano ang talagang inyong pagpili sa ating mga kandidato, yun ang ilagay ninyo sa balota. At huwag na ninyong pansinin yung mga vote buying na yan. Kunin yung pera kung sakali, pero huwag kayong boboto sa sinasabi nyo, iboto ninyo yung gusto ninyo.
Sir, may particular area, sir? Persons involved, sir, sa mga areas, sir?
Wala pa akong nabalitaan na walang balita na may very active vote buying ang binabagsak na pera sa araw na ito. Sa nakaraang ilang araw sa voting day, election day, napakalaki. Kaya siguro kailangan natin tignan ng mabuti saan ba talaga nanggaling ang mga malalaking halaga na ibinibigay sa hindi lamang sa mga leader, kundi pati sa mga boto.
Sir, will you have any information kung particularly in May?
responsible, sir?
Well, I can practically give you a price list of those that have been buying votes. Siguro, I ask, maybe that's something that I can ask the media to help with. Umikot kayo, magtanong kayo, kaninong boto ang binibili para makita natin kung sino ba who is most responsible for the vote buying. I think the media has a farther reach than myself alone. So, tignan niyo yung mga network ninyo na nakakalat sa buong Pilipinas. Siguro, pinakamaganda itanong ninyo sa mga nagbebenta ng boto, sa mga namimili ng boto, kaninong boto ang kanilang binibili.
Sir, how will you monitor yung counting and all?
Well, we have our own internal quick count that we have done in cooperation with several quick count networks. We have actually several different quick counts in my headquarters alone. So that's what we'll be monitoring. We'll also be watching, of course, what is being broadcast on TV, on your station, on all of the social media to see what is the feedback. So I guess we'll be monitoring the same as everybody else, watching TV, but also monitoring on our own internal quick count. Okay?
Sir, lastly, message to your supporters.
Once again, please, all our supporters, and for that matter, all registered voters, please go out and vote. It is the pinakamahalagang karapatan ng isang mamamayan ang makaparinig ang kanilang boses sa araw ng halalan. At huwag kayong nadadala sa mga malalaking pera na ino-offer para bilhin ang inyong boto. Huwag niyong pabayaan na mawala at matahimik ang inyong boses, lalo na sa araw na ito. Huwag niyong pabayaan na masawi ang tunay na ninanais ng ating mga kababayan para sa ating mga leader sa susunod na administrasyon. Maraming salamat sa inyo. Thank you.
Okay, on the line is our reporter, Patty Pasion, who is in Ilocos, covering Bongbong Marcos. Patty, gaya ng nasabi ni Senator Marcos, malawak daw ang vote buying. Totoo ba ito?
Well, so far po, Ms. Checha, dito po sa Ilocos Norte, wala pa naman pong napapareport na vote buying. Sa tingin ko po si Senator Marcos was speaking of the whole country kasi they have been monitoring news reports daw about vote buying.
Okay. Diyan sa Ilocos, kumusta naman ang pagboboto?
Well, dito po wala pa pong naititip sa amin or wala pa po kami nahuhuli na vote buying so far.
Oo. Mapayapa ba? Are the procedures proceeding as planned? Kumusta naman ang mga presinto?
Actually, iba-iba po kasi yung estado ng presinto. Merong maraming botante, kagaya po dun sa Mariano Marcos Memorial Elementary School kung saan po bumoto si Senator Marcos. Meron naman po ngayon kasi bandang tanghali na rin po, kaunti na lang dun sa iba kong naikutan na paaralan. Actually, ang naging issue po dito, kanina nga po nung sa Mariano Marcos Elementary School, nasira yung isang vote counting machine. So, na-delay ng isang oras ang pagboto. Sa iba namang may report na sa ibang school din ay nagkaroon ng nasira ang mga VCM na kinonfirm ng isang election officer na mga apat ang mga napalitang VCM.
Okay, yung mga nasirang VCM, anong ginawa ng mga BEI? Nahinto ba ang pagboboto nung nasira ang mga VCM?
Particularly dun po sa Mariano Marcos Elementary School, natigil po yung pagboto kasi nire-reject ng VCM yung mga balota. So, hindi po sila makapagtanggap ng botante. Yung iba pong na-interview namin doon, siguro alas 7 pa daw sila alas 7 pa sila pumila, pero mga 9 o'clock po na-resume yung pagboto. Ngayon naman, nung tinanong namin sa kanila kung okay lang ba yun, may mga nadismaya, lalo na yung isang lolo namin nakausap, no? Kasi kinailangan pa niyang magpa-check ng blood pressure kasi medyo nahihilo siya. Kasi ang init din dito sa Ilocos, nahihilo siya. Pero yung iba, naintindihan naman nila yung technical glitches kasi computerized, naintindihan nila na posible talaga itong mangyari.
Okay, meron bang ginawa ang mga BEI sa pagtanggap ng mga balota ng mga taong tapos nang bumoto at gusto nang lumabas?
Wala po. Natigil po talaga yung pagboto.
Okay. Doon naman sa pagbibigay ng resibo, meron bang abiryang nangyari? Meron bang mga complaints?
Ngayon po wala namang natatanggap na complaint dito sa mga lugar po dito sa elementary schools kung saan nangyayari yung mga botohan.
Okay. Ang turnout naman, Patty, kumusta?
Yung turnout so far, dun sa mga nakita naming mga lugar, marami-rami po ang mga bumoto. Pero ngayon kasi bandang tanghali na rin nung nakalabas kami. Kasi umalis na rin si Senator Marcos, so nagkaroon kami ng pagkakataon na makaikot. Medyo konti na lang po yung mga taong nandito na bumoboto.
Okay, maraming salamat. That's Patty Pasion covering Bongbong Marcos in the Ilocos region. We now turn to our guests here with us at the Rappler Newsroom. We have Zach Yuson, who is director of Move PH. Zach, what's happening around the country in terms of the Move PH members?
Yes, so earlier Patty was talking about vote buying reported across the country. We've been receiving a lot of active reports of vote buying, but also what's trending now is vote counting machines conking out. And it seems that there have been different reactions from the BEIs on what to do when these vote counting machines conk out. So if we go to our live blog, if I can just put it up here, some of the incidents reported were wrong ballots delivered. Voting didn't push through in one clustered precinct in Hinagaran because the official ballots were delivered to Borongan, Eastern Samar. And then this one in Negros Occidental, Governor Marañon waited for almost 30 minutes after the VCM in his precinct malfunctioned. And here we have a picture of armed Governor Mujib Hataman casting his vote this morning in Basilan Province. Over here, Comelec Chairman Andres Bautista was on his way to Novotel Hotel because there were reports that VCMs were being stored in this hotel. This is in Cubao. So we'll have an update for you later on. Paternias Maquel tweeted this. And 5 VCMs malfunctioned in Angeles City. I think one was fixed, and the 3 others had to be replaced, but the replacements haven't come in. So this is a question of, are there enough VCMs to replace?
VCMs.
Yes, to replace the ones that have broken down. And at the same time, like as you raised with Patty, what happens to those voters who shaded the ballot and couldn't
were ready?
Ready, and couldn't ingest their ballots in the VCMs. Now we've heard reports that some places they were asked to leave the ballots with the BEIs and then sign a waiver or sign a sheet that said the BEIs could hold on to these ballots and then feed it later. There are other cases where the counting totally stopped or the polling didn't even take place. So like in the case of Lenny Robredo, she had to wait for her replacement VCM to come in.
So she hasn't voted?
Well, as of the morning, we heard that she hasn't voted. So we're trying to get an update on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ronnie Holmes, president of Pulse Asia, is here with us too. You're monitoring. You've been monitoring since this morning the precinct activity. And what have you observed so far?
Well, as Zach pointed out, there were some BCMs that did not work. There were cases of problems where some voters were in the list but were not in a biometric list. With regard to the problem with the VCMs, that would, each precinct has an average of about 600 to 800 voters.
Yes.
At the end of the day, we should know how many of these VCMs malfunction and how many of the voters failed to feed their ballots into the VCM.
I'm personally curious about what they did with the ballots because I voted this morning and our VCM was not working. So the BEI said you can leave the ballots with us and you sign this blank sheet of paper which will indicate who left their ballots and we will have to put this into the minutes. We should ask Pat Esmaquel from Comelec whether or not what is happening. All right, we have a update from the chairman of Comelec about this particular situation. Let's go to that update.
Sir, yung kay Katil, kasi maraming sa social media ngayon na you should investigate daw, ganyan. Marami nagagalit. Just a quick statement from you.
Hindi, ako naman, kung merong maghahain ng complaint, ay anin natin, titignan natin.
Pero sa rules po ba bawal yun?
Hindi ko alam kung ano talaga yung nangyari. Kaya, ang alam natin, bawal gumamit ng cellphone sa loob ng presinto. Yun, maliwanag.
All right. I was hoping that the chairman would address the issue of what happens when you have filled your ballot and you're ready to ingest it, but the VCMs are not working. Should you wait until the VCM machines are repaired, or is there another way of doing this? Does the COMELEC authorize the BEI to hold on to the ballots until it is time for you to ingest it in a working VCM machine? And if so, what evidence do you have that your ballot is with the BEI?
There's also another case where one BEI asked 10 voters to put their thumbprint on the ballot. And that automatically
On the ballot.
That automatically invalidates the
invalidate.
ballot. So when they ingested it, of course the machine rejected, but they didn't replace the ballot right away. They asked the voters to come back at the end of the voting to see if they had extra ballots. So these 10 voters were automatically asked to come back.
Disenfranchised.
And if they don't have extra ballots, they would be disenfranchised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's problematic because there's a procedure that's supposed to be followed with regard to what happened to you, Cheche, that actually violates the secrecy of your ballot.
Yes.
I don't know what the COMELEC resolution on that matter is, whether what was done in your precinct is something that is allowed. I myself would not leave my ballot. I will wait until that VCM is operational.
There were quite a number of people that were waiting, and some of them had been waiting since 6 o'clock, and I voted at about 8 a.m.
So,
but I was in a...
Maybe that's something that the COMELEC can clarify because of the number of VCMs that are conking out.
That's true. Let's talk to Paterno Esmaquel, who is our reporter on site at the COMELEC. Pat, what does the COMELEC have to say about all of these VCMs that are conking out? What happens to our ballots?
Hi, Ma'am Cheche. Kagagaling ko lang sa isang buong umaga ng pag-iikot sa iba-ibang mga presinto kasama si COMELEC Chairman Andres Bautista. Marami kaming nakita nga na mga mahahabang pila, mainit sa mga napuntahan namin. Pero dun sa mga nabisita namin, konti naman yung mga nag-malfunction na VCM. May mga ilan na nagsusumbong kay Chairman Bautista kung bakit ganun yung pagkakabasa sa resibo nila. Ang kaniyang lagi sinasabi, kailangan ipapalagay yun sa minutes ng Board of Election Inspectors o yung mga teachers na nagsisilbi ngayong eleksyon. Ngayon, sinasabi din niya na sana natupad nga yung mall voting na proposal niya. Nagsorry pa siya dun sa mga ilang mga botante sa mga presinto dahil masikip daw at sana daw hindi ganun yung proseso at sana raw mas mapaganda pa yung proseso ng mga susunod na eleksyon. Ngayon nandito kami sa Novotel sa Cubao dahil may napabalita na vote counting machines na nandito daw sa loob ng hotel. Pinuntahan ni Chairman Bautista ito at hindi nga verified yung report na merong mga VCMs dito. Siyempre nagbigay siya ng warning sa mga tao na sana next time mas verified yung mga pinapakalat sa social media at maging responsible daw tayo sa pagpapakalat ng balita.
Pero Pat, walang sinasabi si Chairman tungkol sa procedure na kailangan sundan kung ang balota natin ay hindi ma-ingest sa VCMs dahil sa sira itong mga makinang ito. Ang gusto kong itanong, yun bang mga balota, meron bang karapatan ang BEI na ipunin itong mga balotang ito at sila na ang mag-i-ingest pag naayos na yung VCMs?
Aalamin natin yan kay Chairman Bautista, pero yung maliwanag sa ngayon, kapag hindi kasalanan ng botante na hindi tinanggap ng balota ng makina yung kanyang balota, pwede siyang humingi ng one replacement ballot. Isang replacement ballot lang ang pwedeng hingin kapag 4 times na niluwa ng makina yung balota. Yun yung klarong patakaran ng COMELEC sa mga replacement ballots. Of course, kung sira yung mga makina, meron din tayong mga replacement machine, contingency machines na naka-standby.
Yun nga naging problema namin sa presinto namin. Sira yung VCM, pero hindi naman nila pinapalitan yung makina, para ma-ingest yung mga balotang na fill up na at pwede nang tanggapin ng mga VCM machines?
Ilalapit natin yan kay Chairman Bautista kung anong gagawin dapat sa mga presinto na yan. Pero dapat talaga merong mga standby machines at yung mga botante pwede kumuha ng 1 replacement ballot each.
Okay, maraming salamat. Pat Esmaquel, who is currently at Novotel with COMELEC Chairman Andy Bautista. Thank you, Pat. Okay, balik tayo. Let's get back to our conversation here. When you were monitoring your Move PH members and those who are talking to you, most of their concerns had to do with the VCM machines and the inability to ingest their ballots?
Yeah, actually, they were questioning whether it was lawful for them to just leave their ballots, like what Ronald said. Like, can they leave it? Is it okay to sign a waiver? They weren't sure, and I suspect even the BEIs weren't sure as well, because I don't know if this was discussed beforehand. If the contingency that the ballots had been filled out, but the machine does not want to read it, what do they do?
Yes.
So I think even COMELEC might have to come up with some quick guidelines here, because the time for voting is about maybe 5 more hours left.
5 more hours.
Yes, 5 more hours.
5 more hours to actually get this problem sorted out.
Fixed, that's true. And it seems as though there are a lot of machines that are failing at the moment.
Yeah, but I think the COMELEC is somehow responding well, at least to some of these concerns, except that we don't know exactly the extent of VCMs that are conking out. As I said, at the end of the day, they should have the minutes, like what happened, and the number of votes that would be involved with regard to all of these problems. If those votes matter, I don't think it would really matter in terms of the final count, at least for the national level. That would be quite small. Hopefully it's small, I mean... Negligible, but we will know what those reports are at the end of the day. What's more problematic would be cases of disenfranchisement, as well as voter coercion. We're not getting that many reports right now.
Yes.
I mean, based on the monitoring, it seems that people really troop to the polls quite early, something that we've seen also in the past years.
Yes.
And since it started early, let's hope that by 5 p.m., really most of the precincts will be closed, except for the precincts where you have problems with the machines.
Yes, but you know, in the surveys, in the many surveys that you did throughout this 90-day campaign, do you think that the closeness of the race for the presidency has incentivized voters to come out in greater numbers than in the past?
I would say that the national race has been, since it's tightly contested, to a certain extent it draws people into the race, and eventually I think we can expect voting turnout that will be more or less the same as what we had before, despite the fact that you have a number of local competitions that are uncontested.
I see.
And
the same as before?
As before. When I say same as before, historically, if you go back to the 1988 election up to the present one, you've had an average of about 75%. The lowest, if I'm not mistaken, was in the 2007 elections. That's a midterm election. That was about 63%.
75 is quite impressive,
75
isn't it?
for a country which exercises voluntary voting.
Yes.
That's quite high. I mean,
Yes.
it's not compulsory voting. And I think people would be driven largely to vote because, you know, you've got a national competition, both for the presidency and the vice presidency, that have been tight from the very start.
And very contentious. I mean, there are
very
so
contentious, and you have some groups that are actually rabid supporters. Each of the candidates actually have core supporters. And
have core rabid supporters.
Core supporters, and some of those core supporters may be rabid.
Yes.
And you would expect, let's say, if you just look at voting turnout in 2013, some places like Davao City, the voting turnout is actually very low. If I'm not mistaken, a little bit above 60%. But you won't expect Davao City voters not to turn out as much as they had in the past. It might even be 100%, because you have a hometown person, hometown official running for the presidency. So you would expect that in those urban areas where we saw lower turnout, some of the candidates are drawing support from those urban areas, and you would probably have a higher urban turnout, which is not necessarily what we've seen in the past.
Okay. I have a specific question for you that has been on many people's minds. When they say that all the surveys that you turned out over this whole campaign period conditions minds and predisposes people to vote in a certain way, what is your answer to that accusation?
Well, if the surveys actually condition minds, and we would not see shifts in terms of pre-election preferences. And we've seen those shifts from the time that we started doing the surveys in March 2015. So we've seen some candidates leading in some surveys, and then suddenly these candidates would marginally decline or marginally increase. So in that sense, if it was really mind conditioning, then the trend that this claim is happening could have been established from the very start. But we've seen these shifts, and we've seen those shifts largely because of the campaign period.
Okay.
We know that some candidates, basically, their votes are geographically, originate from geographical bases. Like, for example, Mayor Duterte. But once he started to focus, let's say, on concerns that somehow gained traction in areas in the balance of Luzon and started to campaign here, we saw some increase insofar as his preferences in some of the areas. So it's not, I don't think it conditions per se.
What does it do?
Well, it captures the disposition of the public at a specific point. And I guess that it may influence the voting behavior of the public, but it's only one of those factors that will influence voting decision. And I would even venture to say that it's not the primary factor that will influence their voting decision. Their assessment of the character of the candidate, the events that transpire that would eventually image or mirror what the candidate's character would be, are the things that may have a much more greater impact in terms of their voting decision rather than survey results, which just capture the disposition
A moment in time.
at a moment in time.
Okay. Zach, do you see that happening in your move.ph reactions?
Well, we've seen...
Does it correlate?
I think that's a very good observation because we've seen changes in the audience share and the trends that have appeared in social media. Mind you, last year Duterte, before he declared that he would run, or actually when he declared that he wouldn't run, it tended to die down on social media. But then it picked up again. People were saying that Duterte should run, or people were actually clamoring for him to run.
Yes.
By December, it shot up, and until then, it never really died. And we don't really see that in terms of what people maybe post in their blogs, but we see that in what people tweet or retweet. And as what Paige showed earlier, he's getting a larger share of the audience and share of voice. Now the question, I guess, is does it really matter? I mean, just because people speak up about him or talk about him a lot, could be I could be angry about him and still speak about him. Doesn't necessarily reflect. I think what shows in the survey. So I actually want to know how much of what we see in the surveys is really the younger generation speaking out because they can they have that platform to speak out. How much of how the youth will go out and vote. I don't know if you have that historically, but it would be nice to see whether the youth are going to make a big splash this year. As they always say, every elections, the youth vote is powerful, but I'm not so sure the youth vote is united. What do you think?
Well, the youth vote if you look at age groups, the youngest age group, the 18 to 24 age group, that's the group that has the lowest voting turnout in the past.
Interesting.
If you look at their preferences, at least for the presidential candidates, it's pretty much divided between Mayor Duterte in the last survey and Grace Poe. But there was one time that it was split actually three ways. BP-B9 was also generating support from the 18 to 24 age group. In the vice presidential race, initially it was Chis Escudero that was getting so much support from the 18 to 24. In the last survey, if I'm not mistaken, it was really again three-way between Chis, Bongbong, and Lenny. The youth did not really go for Bongbong earlier, but that's the mileage that you get from a campaign.
From an extended campaign.
From an extended campaign. I mean, 90 days of a campaign, that's really that's so long that there are many things that a candidate may do or may fail to do that would definitely impact on their pre-election preferences.
Okay. When you were doing surveys and, there were the COMELEC debates, right? Were these markers in your survey data that showed spikes or changes in attitude as a result of the debates?
It took a while, Cheche. It took a while. It did not happen, the spike did not, or the change did not happen until about maybe a week or two after. And it was more geographical rather than national altogether.
Geographical?
For example, let me give an example. When Mayor Duterte cursed the Pope, nationally there was not a significant decline in terms of his preference. But there was a decline in the National Capital Region. Most recently, because of the controversial rape joke, we did not see that much of a dent in terms of his preference. But in the National Capital Region and in Class ABC, there was a decline. It was borderline,
Well,
almost
how
significant.
do you explain that?
That means that there are populations in certain areas are much more sensitive to statements that are found to be offensive or reprehensible.
But geographical?
It's geographical because this is an area that you have much more saturation in terms of media compared to, let's say, some other areas. Access to media, and since media reports both in social media and traditional media will be the primary source of information, then you would note that in these areas where you do have much more information and better access to information, that's where voters tend to react to certain statements or certain events. But the traction, the amount of time that it takes for that to gain traction or resonance is not immediate.
Okay, is that true of all issues that burst into the limelight, that traction takes time?
It does take time. Because, for example, in this particular election, what we've done is to do weekly surveys, those commission surveys by ABS-CBN. What has happened there is that, you don't get it most immediately. Not 3 days after the debate. And it's not so much a debate. It would be reports on the debate.
Okay.
And the reports are a mix of several things. No? It may be positive or negative. It may be light, very superficial, and quite substantive. And people are quite attentive to the news. Our own surveys will show that about 72% of the public watch news at least 4 times a week. So those are things that we should consider. And the news that are played up, reports that are played up in the news, are the ones that may basically shape or condition the minds of the voters, regardless of who they support, whether they will retain their support or shift it to another candidate.
That's interesting. I wonder, Zach, in your in the tweets and the Move PH reactions, if reactions, let's say, to certain events, a statement by Duterte, a debate that has been done, if the reactions are immediate?
Well, definitely. I think once something goes online, and the sooner that he says a statement, or any candidate for that matter.
So it's within minutes. For example, during a debate, you have instantaneous remarks.
Instantaneous remarks, and sometimes actually what we don't see is that there are things that are trending that gain momentum more than what we can predict. So there's always that magical question: what goes viral? How do you make something go viral? And no one really has that secret sauce. And there's something that can go viral because there are a group of influencers who are maybe unknown, and they just happen to tweet at the same time at the same thing, and that will go viral.
But are we talking sheer number of people talking about it? Or?
I would say number, but also just the reach of these people. So influence we see in social media plays a big role. You can have your own community and have influence in that community, but you don't necessarily have the reach of a bigger audience. If you're a celebrity, of course, it's different. If you're Kath Neal or any of these celebrities, Kim Chiu, one tweet will just go viral quickly.
Okay.
But in terms of organic, virality, that's really hard. That's hard to tell. And what we found is that people, of course, have their own interpretation of events. So even if, let's say, a candidate like Mayor Duterte says something, you have one side that will take it positively, and then you have another side that will take it negatively. And that creates, I think, the discussion that creates the virality. And then from there, you have sub-conversations that go on and take place. Yeah.
So much faster than we see it on surveys.
Yeah, that you see even in traditional media, because I think social media, there's a certain tendency for people really to just focus on one thing that they're quite passionate about.
Yes.
And I'm amazed that the most absurd thing that comes out in social media, that might be the secret sauce, are the ones that become viral.
Yes.
So, and I don't think it applies in politics, but when they say good or bad publicity, it's still
good.
publicity.
Still publicity, yes.
I think in politics, it doesn't really work that way, But having negative reports about a candidate may turn off some voters, but question is, those voters have already not signified support for that candidate. So it's like some candidates, regardless of negative reports, are consolidating and firming up their supporters. Regardless of the news, there's some selectivity in terms of the reception of information among the supporters of a candidate.
So would you consider, for example, surveys and comments on social media as large, as huge influencers, big factors for ordinary citizens to use as points of consideration when trying to assess their candidates?
Well, we run questions in our surveys as to what are the most influential factors. Both social media, winnability, and surveys basically lag behind.
Lag behind?
Lag behind. When I say lag behind, you have small single-digit responses coming from the respondents. The primary one would really be news reports. The second one would be advertisements. The third one would be getting to know the candidates personally, the way that they barnstorm across the country. So, and with regard to media, it's primarily the traditional media. You have TV
Television,
and radio, then social media, and then you have the newspapers. So, because it's not so much a fact, because the surveys generate just simply how pre-election preferences are stacked up.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily mean that the survey that we did in March would mean that this candidate is already winnable, given that there's always that change insofar as pre-election preference. So we've tested it. It's really, winnability is just right down there. Family and friends are much more influential. Family, friends, and relatives tend to influence voting decision more than anything else, more than what they see in social media. The ones who are active in social media, we can say, are not necessarily gladiators, but they're quite attentive. They're an audience. You have gladiators fighting in the ring, and these are the attentive audiences. But I don't think that beyond those who are attentive in social media, for the most part, people who are in social media may not necessarily be engaged in something that is partisan.
Yes. People who are engaged in social media, are they just among themselves? It's just them? Or are other people also watching out for what they have to say?
Well, I think they're still part of a bigger community, and people on social media of all ages, not just of the youth, they're just airing out what they would rather, what would normally tell other people, their friends or their family members. It's just a bigger audience. So it's really just a spectrum of the whole society. Of course, there are a lot more people in the Philippines who are not on social media, 60% at this point.
60%?
Yeah.
But you would think that social media is the all-powerful medium because everybody is on her cell phone.
Yeah, my sense is that it's good for mobilization. It really has been a powerful tool for mobilizing supporters.
Okay.
And those supporters, you get them in, and then they also post, they comment on anything. The adverse comments against the candidate that they will support, they will basically bully anyone who comes in, right? So it's a mobilizational tool, but insofar as influencing voting behavior, that's something that I would think we have not seen yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
But growing?
Oh, definitely.
Definitely growing. Okay, we now have on the line Bea Cupin in Rojas City, who has been following Mar Rojas, right? Bea? Let's watch
A calm, serene, and visibly upbeat Mar Rojas cast his vote here in his hometown of Rojas City, the same place where 3 months ago allies asked permission from fellow Capizanos to bring another Rojas into Malacanang. The Liberal Party standard bearer is joined by wife Corina, son Paolo, and other family members. It has been a long, emotional, and arduous 3 months for Rojas. He started his campaign with dismal survey numbers, despite getting the endorsement of President Benigno Aquino III, who is also chairman of the ruling party. But there was no trace of exhaustion in his face on election day. In fact, before he cast his vote, he had breakfast at a nearby palengke and after, had coffee with his nieces and his son. His is a campaign that promises to continue and improve on Daang Matuwid, but that hasn't been easy because alongside that, he has had to fend off criticisms of the current government, including Metro Manila traffic, lack of inclusive growth, and supposed selective justice. The battle cry is now Disente against the supposed dictatorship of survey frontrunner Rodrigo Duterte. Like all other camps, the LP today is confident of a win. But what we will find out in a few hours is if Daang Matuwid, warts and all, can truly win a Philippine election. Bea Cupin, Rappler, Rojas City.
Thank you for your report, Bea. What's the mood like in Rojas City?
Oh, he was very, like I mentioned earlier, he was very upbeat, very relaxed. He has even invited us to lunch after we voted. No trace of nervousness or anxiety, at least in front of media. Sasha?
Okay. What about the precincts? Did everything run as smoothly as planned?
For Rojas, yes. But I have to note that he voted in a very small barangay. But the biggest problem there was when media started mobbing him, following all around. So that was the only hiccup earlier. But otherwise, went smoothly for him.
Okay. What about the ballots? Were voters able to ingest their ballots in the VCMs? Because we've been getting feedback that some of the VCMs and some of the precincts are not functioning.
At least in the precinct where Mar Rojas voted, we didn't hear of any problems. So, but again, it might have been a factor of it was a very small barangay compared to other barangays here in Rojas City.
How about the turnout, Bea?
We haven't really gotten the numbers yet. When Mar was there earlier, it was a sizable crowd. In fact, he mentioned this during our chance interview after he voted. He thinks that, the sheer number of people coming out to vote is a sign of a vibrant democracy. And he, of course, ties this with his confidence that, the Liberal Party will win this election. Again, this is the Liberal Party painting this election as, a battle between decency, that's their battle cry now, and a dictatorship under the survey frontrunner.
Why? Okay, thank you very much for your report, Bea, and I hope you've been able to get some rest and some sleep after being there for so long.
The live
okay,
blog? You can with some updates in the live blog.
Yes, please share with us.
So if I can pull up the live blog here.
Okay.
Yes. Abby Binay says, ready for results, win or lose. So this is
she's a candidate for mayor in Makati. Yes.
And then let's see, we've had some reports of vote buying here now. Sacks of rice, 1,500 to 3,000 pesos, which is pretty high because some vote buying reports have extended from 50 pesos to 1,500 pesos. So 3,000 pesos would be the highest.
Where is this?
This is in Lentes reporting this in Lipa. So that's interesting.
It's a new congressional district. It's a lone congressional district. One of the new districts in Batangas.
Hotly contested?
Hotly contested between, I think, Sabili and Vilma Santos. Vilma Santos, who is a term-limited governor standing as congressman in the area. She used to be mayor of the place.
Yes.
So I don't know what the source of the money is, but
how do you confirm reports like that?
Well, we try to. Well, this is from a partner called Lente, and they're a group of lawyers that actually have people on the ground to verify these reports. But of course, these are all second-hand reports, and usually it's very difficult to confirm who's actually doing the vote buying because sometimes it's a bit of negative propaganda against the other candidate.
Yes.
But by the way, I forgot to mention sacks of rice plus money. So that's actually not just the rice itself.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we have a report of a grenade thrown in Maguindanao. Let me just pull that up quickly. Yes, rifle grenades fired in Maguindanao. So we're still getting reports of violent incidents. Of course, as you know, there were people killed in Cavite, and hopefully nothing too grave today.
So these are rifle grenades that have been discovered?
Yes, they were fired in Maguindanao.
Fired?
Yes, and the army is investigating.
No casualties?
There are 2 civilians who were injured, but I think no casualties yet.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I hope we have less of those reports. As you move out of the difficulties in the precinct, you now go into incidents of violence. Before you go, Professor Holmes, what is your fearless forecast for today?
Well, my only forecast, I think the optimistic forecast is that I hope the conduct of the elections will be peaceful and orderly. I would not forecast in terms of the outcomes, but that will largely depend on the turnout, and I hope the turnout is high.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us again today.
Thanks,
and we'll see you again because I'm sure that we'll have to dovetail your predictions with your survey results.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And now, let's, as we say goodbye to Professor Holmes, let's watch this vlog filed by Caterina Francisco.
After delays caused by malfunctioning vote counting machine, the Liberal Party's vice presidential candidate Leni Robredo has finally cast her ballot here at the Tabuco Central School in Naga City. The machine malfunctioned past 8 a.m. and was still not repaired when Robredo arrived at her voting precinct past 9 a.m. The machine was eventually replaced by a new one. While Robredo was waiting for the machine to be repaired, she obliged supporters who want to have photos taken with her. Earlier today, Robredo also went to the Eternal Gardens to visit the tomb of her late husband, Jesse Robredo, and also stopped by the Archbishop's Palace. Robredo earlier said she needs prayers to win the elections, citing reports of rampant vote buying in the region. Robredo is up against 4 other candidates with ties to the vote-rich Bicol region, but her closest rival is Senator Bongbong Marcos, who is banking on the strength of the solid North Ilocos vote. Will Bicol rally behind Robredo? We'll know the initial results in a matter of hours. Caterina Francisco, Rappler, Naga City.